Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about a game known as Tekken Cross Street Fighter. The argument I want to make in this video is basically that I never want this game to be released, but in order to explain why, I first want to give you some context by providing the history of this game and its troubled development. A game known as Street Fighter Cross Tekken was first announced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2010. This would be a 2D Street Fighter style fighting game featuring characters from the Tekken franchise. At the same event, the director of Tekken, Katsuhiro Harada, announced that Namco were working on their own game. Known as Tekken Cross Street Fighter, this would be a 3D Tekken-style fighting game featuring characters from the Street Fighter IP. Street Fighter Cross Tekken was released 2 years later in March of 2012 to mixed but overall positive reviews, gaining an average of 8 out of 10 across most platforms. The fans, however, were obviously a lot less excited as the game sales underperformed by some 40%, leaving its developers, Capcom, disappointed. The same month, a poll was posted on the Tekken Facebook page asking fans what characters they wanted to see appear in Tekken Cross Street Fighter, so we can assume that at this point the game's development was well underway. In April of 2012, 1 month later, Harada confirmed that the game was about 10% complete. Roughly 1 year later, in June of 2013, the digital exclusive Tekken game, Tekken Revolution, was suddenly released. This game came with its own character poll. Fans got to decide between a couple of different unfinished character concepts to decide what new original character would be introduced into the game. Some of these concepts included the dead and zombified younger sister of Miguel, as well as an evil rival of Lars's known only as female Tekken Force. The character concept that won the poll, however, was Sexy Female Vampire, and soon after we were greeted with the release of Tekken original character, Elisa. The significance of Elisa when talking about Tekken Cross Street Fighter is that she was the first Tekken character ever to have a fireball-style projectile. My theory is that whichever character had won the character poll, they would have had this projectile, and this was Namco's attempt to experiment with the concept of a fireball in a Tekken environment. It would make sense to ease the fans into this transition by allowing them to decide for themselves what this new character should look like. Tekken 7 was first announced to the world in July of 2014. By this time the developers would have been split between the two projects. Tekken 7 had its first limited arcade release about 1 year later in March of 2015. In a subsequent update to the arcade release of Tekken 7, iconic Street Fighter character Akuma was released. It can be assumed that his gameplay design was influenced heavily by the progress that had been made on the Tekken Cross Street Fighter project, as Akuma played almost entirely like a Street Fighter 4 character, including things like focus attacks. In April of 2016, Harada revealed that the development of Tekken Cross Street Fighter had been officially put on hold to focus on the further development of Tekken 7. He did, however, also reveal that the game was about 30% complete at this point. As of the making of this video, this is the last news we ever heard of Tekken Cross Street Fighter. Returning now to the reasons I don't want this game to be released, I basically have two main arguments against it. The first argument is basically the issue of game mechanics, and the way I see it, you can go two ways when you introduce a Street Fighter character into a Tekken game. The first way would be to allow the Street Fighter character to retain all of its game-specific mechanics such as jumps, fireballs, and special cancels, and somehow attempting to balance that for a Tekken environment. Looking at the way Namco decided to introduce Akuma into Tekken 7, we can assume that this is the way that they had planned to introduce Street Fighter characters in Tekken Cross Street Fighter. I was playing Tekken 7 in the arcades almost every day around the time of Akuma's original release, and to say that it was a problematic implementation would be a huge understatement. I can remember the character being balance patched more than 4 times just to bring him down to a reasonably balanced level. I think this was less an issue of Namco accidentally introducing a character that was far too strong into the game, and more an issue of Akuma having such unique mechanics that he was almost impossible to balance for the Tekken environment. While Namco were eventually successful in balancing Akuma, he ended up being a character of low popularity in the game. More importantly, he seems to be a character that most Tekken players don't enjoy playing against. In my personal opinion, playing against Akuma often feels like me and my opponent are playing two different games and just happen to be on the same screen. This begs the question, how would you as a Tekken player feel if literally half of all the matches you played were against Akuma or a character like him? The other, and in my opinion far superior way of introducing a Street Fighter character into Tekken would have been something like what was done with Negan, a character that comes from a completely different franchise but had his own traditional Tekken move list developed specifically for this game. I don't see why Akuma could not have been a more traditional Tekken character and still retained all of the moves that make him iconic. A Shoryuken could have been a low and high crushing combo starter that was very minus on block, similar to a lightning screw from a character like Lars, and his Tatsu could have been a corkscrew move used to spin in combos. This is just conjecture on my part, but I think this might have allowed the character for more popularity, as it would allow dedicated Tekken players to pick up and understand him without learning difficult mechanics from a different franchise that they don't enjoy playing as much. However, if you are going to develop a Tekken game where 50% of the roster has completely new and original Tekken style move lists, would you rather that energy was put into developing Street Fighter characters for a Tekken game, or that it was put towards developing the characters that already exist in Tekken, or introducing new and original Tekken characters such as Tekken Force Girl into the franchise? I for one would definitely prefer having her in a new installment of Tekken over a character like Cammy. This brings me to my second big argument against the release of Tekken Cross Street Fighter, and it is something I'm going to refer to as the guest character problem. Guest characters have become a staple in fighting games lately, and it's easy to understand why. The announcement of a guest character often generates extreme excitement, and posts explode all over social media advertising the game for free. There is no denying the important role that guest characters have come to play in shifting copies of a video game, but the excitement very often seems to fade soon after the characters are implemented into the actual games. If the only reason you picked up a copy of Soul Calibur 6 is you really want to play as 2B because she's one of your favorite characters from one of your favorite games, you're probably quite likely to return to playing that game or another game like it rather than remaining a dedicated Soul Calibur fan. This begs the very important question, what does that say for the long-term survivability of a Tekken game where literally half the roster is made up of guest characters? How would you feel if your own main character was left out of the new main installment in the Tekken franchise to make room for a character like Dhalsim or Blanka? I think ultimately Street Fighter players and Tekken players play those games because they prefer them to other games in the genre, and while these titanic franchises coming together into a single game would definitely generate an extreme amount of excitement at first, I think in the long term both communities would prefer to play a solid version of their favorite game. The best analogy I can come up with for the release of a game like Tekken Cross Street Fighter would be pissing your own pants. Something that feels very warm and cozy at first, but quite quickly turns cold and lonely. I posted this poll on my own YouTube channel a couple of days ago in preparation for this video. So far more than 2,000 people have answered it, and it seems like the vast majority of the Tekken playing community would prefer a new strong standalone entry into the franchise over something like Tekken Cross Street Fighter. Tekken 7 is in my opinion one of the greatest fighting games ever made, and we are currently living in a golden age of Tekken that will be remembered long after the lifespan of this game has ended. This is a return to form for a franchise that had struggled for many years to keep up with its legendary legacy. The next installment in the franchise will probably be the deciding factor as to whether or not Tekken is able to ride this wave of popularity and retain its position as the most highly regarded fighting game franchise in the world, or fade back into relative obscurity compared to franchises like Street Fighter. As somebody who will definitely be playing Tekken and making content on it no matter what happens, I definitely know which outcome I would prefer.